El Todos Hablamos McDonald's Deal. Porque cuando están decidiendo qué ordenar y la tía Carmen te dice
McNugget, mijo, y una de las hamburguesas con esa salsita, ¿sabes?
ya tú sabes que eso significa una Big Mac. Y lo sabes porque tú también amas esa salsita. Hay un meal para cada cena familiar en McDonald's. Compra uno de tus favoritos como unos McNuggets de 10 piezas o una Big Mac y te llevas otro por $1. Precios y participación pueden variar. Producto individual a precio regular. No puede combinarse con ninguna otra oferta.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the long-awaited second episode of Turntables and Tea. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Cory.
Yeah, we apologize a bit for the delay, but things like illness and going out of town happened, and that put us behind, but we're back and we're going to be better than ever. So
life has its way of trying to get us not to make podcasts, but we're here and we're finally getting it on the road again.
Yes, fortunately. So this time we'll be discussing Hard Promises by Tom Petty.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I had a great time doing this one.
I had a lot more fun doing this one than I thought it was going to be. And of course, we'll get into it, but I totally agree. There's so much going on behind the scenes and inside this album. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, Petty's an interesting artist. I loved looking into him again. I had before, of course, but re-looking into him just reminded me of how interesting he is and how strong his catalog is. I really enjoyed getting in deep with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I'm kind of sad to be leaving their world for a bit, but at least I got to spend some time in it. For those who don't know, Hard Promises was the follow-up to Damn the Torpedoes, which was the breakthrough album for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. It was the album that made them superstars, huge throughout 1979 and 1980. So Hard Promises was the long-awaited follow-up. It was actually reported that it was originally supposed to be 24 songs and called Benmont's Revenge, after keyboardist Benmont Tench, which is an interesting title, but I'm glad they didn't go with it, and I'm glad it's not 24 songs because they really did a good job of compacting this track listing down. It's very smooth and very strong.
I agree with you there on the pulling it down to what do we finalize with 10 tracks on this one. 24 on this. Wow. I wonder if they would have been jammed out, just instrumental stuff that we don't necessarily hear that much from them. But thank you for bringing it down to 10, guys.
Yeah. Well, one of the leftover tracks did have a history of its own, and we'll be talking about that one a bit today. It's not on this album, but you all know it anyway. So, but we're going to get there. We're not there quite yet. But anyway, we've established super high anticipation for Hard Promises. It is released in May of 1981, and MCA Records, which was the head of Blackstreet Records, that was a subsidiary label that Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were on, they wanted to do superstar pricing for this album and release it for the list price of $9.98 instead of the standard price of $8.98. They'd had success doing this with both Steely Dan's Gaucho and the Xanadu soundtrack. And so they figured we could do it with Tom Petty too. People will buy the album.
So there were two albums released on that price point before Tom Petty put his dukes up on this and said, no way.
Yes.
I see. I did not realize that. I thought this was the first one that they were hitting. And it makes it even more of a victory for him on getting it out at the $8.90 price.
Yeah, he was not going to back down. He insisted that this album should be affordable to his fans and that MCA release it at the standard list price. And he was very vocal about it in the press. He even made the cover of Rolling Stone in the summer of 1981, primarily talking about this issue. But it did work for him, and record prices didn't go up for a while after that. That was one of Petty's greatest accomplishments in his mind, for sure.
And it also came off the heels of him fighting with them. It was a huge hit. And then to have this victory afterwards. I mean, we're sitting here in 2022 talking about $1, And some of our listeners might be like, I mean, whoop-de-doo, what giant victory. But I mean, if you look at it, you could get a pack of smokes for 82 cents at that time. You could get a dozen of eggs for 97 cents at that time. I ended up looking it up. It's crazy. 50-day supply of your daily vitamins for $1 back then. So I mean, that was a big deal. That was a big deal. Think of that's like them saying $20 extra on an album right now. What a great victory for him.
These days, of course, we know that a gallon of gas is getting closer to costing you $8.98 or $9.98, sadly.
Right.
But
yeah,
it was a different time, and he got the victory, and it worked for him. His audience, for the most part, returned for this one. It wasn't quite as big as Damn the Torpedoes, but it still did well. It peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200 and was certified platinum in the US upon its May 1981 release. It also went gold in Australia and platinum in Canada. Jimmy Iovine, the producer of both this album and Damn the Torpedoes, he naturally returned for this one after the success of the previous project. He really loved this album and felt it was better than Damn the Torpedoes and felt it should have been an even bigger hit. It was actually a bit disappointed by the results, but it's kind of hard to see this as a failure. It was still one of Tom Petty's most successful albums. And really the disappointing album for them came after Long After Dark, which still went gold in the US. Tom Petty's record sales were quite consistent through the years.
I mean, it was also a tough year to go against, if we're going to judge it just off record sales. I mean, you had Double Fantasy, you had High Infidelity, you had, you had a bunch of contenders coming. I mean, even Stevie Nicks got Belladonna out, which didn't hold it too long. But I mean, these are what you're competing for. A Foreigner had 4 this year. There's a bunch of music out right now. No, it was a great album. I agree with Iovine on that one. It was I think it was better than Damn the Torpedoes, but that's my opinion, and we'll get to the opinions later. But it was surprising when I looked up the sales for this and where it ended up on the charts and whatnot.
No, Petty was definitely in a crowded landscape when it came to rock music. One album you forgot, Journey's Escape. That was a huge one too. I mean, sure. Don't Stop Believing's on that album. I don't have to say much more.
True.
I don't like this one as much as Damn the Torpedoes, but here's a Tom Petty hot tea take. This one's going to be unpopular with Petty fans. I think this is the second best of all of the albums, right behind Damn the Torpedoes.
Heard.
I know a lot of people freak out over Full Moon Fever and Wildflowers, and Full Moon Fever's great. Wildflowers is overrated. That's my hot tea take. Come at me.
Hey, I'll be with you on that. Even living inside when Wildflowers was jamming, on the radio and whatnot, I thought it was overrated. And I love Petty. I get down Petty. I never hated on his sound, but it just wasn't. I just always felt like it didn't live up to what I had always looked at him and the boys as musicians. We agree on that hot take.
Okay. Many others don't, though. I wonder if we'll get any angry messages, but
right.
It's still a good album, but it's not as good as you all make it out to be. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry.
That's the beauty of the music community. Bring all of the opinions together, and we'll laugh and drink and talk about them all night long.
Yes, we will. And with that being said, I'm ready to get started talking about Hard Promises by beginning with track number 1, The Waiting.
Oh, before we jump in, It was something that you brought to my attention. And I think it's something that's really cool to share with our listeners that might not be super familiar with the time or super familiar with the album, but them planning on being in the same studio as Lennon, and then that not happening, and then also etching "We Love You, JL" in the run out Dead Wax, I think is something that I literally have goosebumps saying it out loud, but it's something that I had never seen before. So thank you for sharing that one with me, because that was a deep cut take there that I had no idea ever happened.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool that they did that, because obviously the Beatles influenced Petty and his guys. And it's funny hearing that, Paul. I saw Paul McCartney this past weekend, and at one point he did a virtual duet with John Lennon of I've Got a Feeling from Let It Be. That was a highlight of the show for me, for sure. That's one of my favorite Beatles songs. So
we'll talk about that after the podcast, because I did not know that even happened, and you must give me the details on that. But are you serious? All right, go on.
I will tell you, I promise. Yes, with that all being said, I'm ready to get started with this album. Track number 1 is The Waiting. This was the big hit off the album. Another excellent book I didn't get to read the whole thing of, but I looked up the section on Hard Promises. It's called Conversations with Tom Petty, where Petty is interviewed about his life and career, and he gave a lot of great insight on the creation of these songs. I found it very illuminating, and it helped me put it all together a bit more.
That's cool, because I have some questions. You know me, I like to try to get into the mind of the songwriter, whether it be something that we can fully flesh out or whether it just be random thoughts inside. And I did my digging as well, but I'd like to hear what you got on this, because it's a very narrative album. It's a very storytelling album. It doesn't leave much to the imagination, so to speak, lyrical wise. So I'm excited to hear what you got on that.
So Tom Petty said that he got it from the Janis Joplin quote, "I love being on stage. Everything else is just waiting."
Oh, wow. Wow, that's amazing. Heard
but
that.
Roger McGuinn of the Byrds swears he said it to Tom Petty, but Petty thinks it was probably Joplin who inspired this one. And Tom first came up with the chorus for this track, which of course is killer because this is a song everybody knows. However, he spent weeks writing around that chorus, trying to get a cohesive song together.
Because the cadence on the song is different than a lot of the popular cadences or rhythms, especially the way he does a 3-take going into the end of each verse, into the bridge. It's pretty wild to hear that he was writing around that. And the waiting is the hardest part, is them talking about being on stage. That's amazing, amazing and glorious.
Well, I don't think the song is about that, but it was inspired by that. Because this is a love song, of course, but it's a damn good love song. And it was the first single from the album. This song went to 19 on the Hot 100 and #1 on the rock charts for 6 weeks throughout the summer of '81. Jimmy Iovine thought this song was better than Refugee and was disappointed it wasn't even bigger. I don't know. That's a tough call to make because Refugee's Refugee, come on. But this has definitely remained a classic rock radio staple, and it is naturally the most covered song on the album. The one cover I really wanted to discuss came in 1995 by California country rock legend Linda Ronstadt for her album Feels Like Home. She countrified this song and even performed it on David Letterman, and she killed it, I thought. I thought it was a fantastic version, and Linda Ronstadt was supreme at singing this kind of music. It's sad that she no longer can sing because of medical illnesses similar to Parkinson's. I'm not remembering the name of it right now, sadly, but she can no longer sing. But she did a great job with The Waiting. And it was a nice return to her roots too, because she'd spent over a decade not doing country rock.
Neat. It was such a neat performance. And again, want to thank you for passing through to me, and such a big band behind her too to perform like that. It was really, really well done.
Letterman got some big bands on his show because you had Paul Schaefer's band.
That's true too. That's true. You had all those players sitting there ready to go.
Yeah. There's some great Letterman performances out there. There's actually a great one of Ronstadt with Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris all singing After the Gold Rush together.
Heard that. Oh.
It's amazing. If you haven't seen that, look it up. It's fantastic.
I like it.
So The Waiting was going to be a hard single to follow, but they did it with track #2 on the album, A Woman in Love, It's Not Me. This was co-written with guitarist Mike Campbell. And it was the second single on the album. I think the song's title kind of explains what it's about.
It does indeed. It does indeed. In my opinion, it has something to work against right off the bat, because the original, or the starting note, or the starting riff, is so similar to the solo in Waiting. It almost takes me right back to Waiting when it starts. But this song, man, you want to talk about a narrative musical piece. All of the sad remembrances while he's talking about the relationship, just a snare tap and a hi-hat really makes you listen to it. And then they come through and smack you in the face with the bridge. It's a phenomenal song.
I completely agree. But sadly, not everybody got to hear it. It only peaked at 79 on the Hot 100, which is a chart travesty, one of many over the years, but this is one of the biggest I can think of. But the reason it didn't do well was because the Heartbreakers were competing with themselves, because at the same time this song was released as a single, the lead single off of Stevie Nicks' Belladonna, Stop Dragging My Heart Around, was released and went all the way up to number 3 on the charts. However, 2 Tom Petty songs were not going to be played on the radio at once at this time. So the Stevie duet won out, as we all know. In fact,
Wow.
Stop Dragging My Heart Around charted higher than any Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers song ever. Of all of them, that's the highest charting.
So how deep do we want to go down this road right now? Because Insider, correct? Insider went to her first and then came back, whether it was him bringing it back or her bringing it back. Am I correct about this?
Well, he took it for himself, but she still wanted the song.
Got you. And then so they end up giving her
Stop Dragging My Heart
Around, and it blows up. And I didn't think we'd get to the Knicks side of the story until Insider, but I mean, her being so groupie-ish, and I'm not even trashing her on this, because she was, out there telling people, like, here's the deal. If Tom Petty had asked me, and I'm paraphrasing this, but it's very close to her, quote unquote. If Tom Petty asked me to be in Tom Petty and Heartbreakers, I'd leave Fleetwood Mac. And even though this was after Rumors and we're here in 81, she was all around them all the time. I mean, she was dating Iovine at this point, right? If she was releasing Belladonna.
You're absolutely right. And she chose Jimmy Iovine as the producer for Belladonna because she wanted to get as close to the sound of the Heartbreakers as possible.
There might even have been a quote, and I don't want to misquote her, but I'm almost positive Rolling Stones wrote that she had said to Iovine, I want to be Tom Petty of 1979, or whenever they started working together, or the girl Tom Petty, that's what it was. I would love to be the girl Tom Petty of 1979, I believe is the quote. Even if I'm paraphrasing, she was enamored with him, with his sound, and the Heartbreakers, with their sound, and it shows. And of course we'll get back and jam on that when we get to Insider, but I thought it was wild to see how much of a groupie she was. And then man, there's so much that goes into this for my thought process on this album, because I'm trying to decipher where this, in my opinion, this is a love album. This story is almost not repeated, but just worked on throughout the album, all the way until you can still change your mind. So I started digging him and was like, who is his girlfriend at this time? Or where's Tom Petty? And meanwhile, he's in love with his high school sweetheart.
Yes, he was married to Jane Benyow.
Yeah,
he wasn't eventually happily married.
No, that's true. That's true. But then I thought, well, Stevie Nicks. Sorry, Stevie, I'm gonna say this. She's in there with her claws in something. She's notorious for being a lover. And I was like, man, she's on the album, but that wasn't the case. She was actually a great friend became a great friend with his wife, because the band was sort of like, hey, we're not starstruck over here. You can be around, you can be with Iovine, you can chill. And I believe this is Petty's own words in the biography, where he said, it wasn't until she became friends with my wife that I saw how good and true she was. And then I was like, all right, I'll start working.
Yeah, for better or for worse, Stevie Nicks was very good friends with Jane Petty. The worst part comes in the fact that they both did cocaine all the time together because, well, if you were friends with Stevie Nicks in 1981, that was kind of part of the equation. Ben Montench even said at one point, it was when I went on tour with Stevie Nicks that I really saw how much cocaine was available. She was quite notorious for using the drug, as we all know, but fortunately, she doesn't anymore. Don't snort coke, kids. Bad idea.
There you go. There you go.
Now on to the next track. One of my favorites on this album, Night Watchman.
You like the Night Watchman? Huh? I love it. I love it.
I love it.
Well, you go. I'd love to hear your take on this.
This has always been one of my favorites on here. And I kind of just always loved the groove of it. I didn't really put that much thought into the lyrics. But when I really listened to it, I thought, he's really singing about a security guard. There's no other way to interpret the song. And in the Conversations with Tom Petty book, Petty said that he wrote the song from what he felt would be the perspective of a night watchman that watched him out, that kept guard of his home.
That's
because
awesome.
At that point, Petty was famous enough he needed a security guard at night with a gun. And Petty was pretty sure that that inspired this song. And Petty just kind of thought it was crazy he had one of these guys outside his house, but he was famous enough to do so.
Yeah, it is that song. It's that night song. I mean, even in my notes, I had perfect night strut riff from the guitar, the early staccato picking in the original riff that goes throughout, and that just 2 half-note bass. It's like that late 70s sneaking Sally through the alley vibe, and you're automatically at least just moving your shoulders, you're right there with it. And then this is the first track on the album, if I'm correct, where that slide dobro sound that they used a lot after this on the album came out, and it's one of my favorite sounds from them.
Yeah, I just thought to myself, this song's kind of funky, actually, and I love that. You don't normally put funky and Tom Petty in the same sentence, but in this case, Tom Petty was funky.
I totally agree with you. Couldn't say it better. Tom Petty was funky in this one.
And what I find interesting about this is that even though this song was admittedly based on Petty's celebrity life because he had a night watchman, he's writing the song that relates to the everyday American, which was a thing that he was so good at. He was definitely a part of the heartland rock genre along with Springsteen and Seeger. They wrote the songs for the working man, and security guards are working men. And to have a song from that perspective just kind of solidifies Petty's everyday ethos, I think.
Yeah, what a great thought. I mean, and even this album's everyman message with the price hike war. Great thought.
And speaking of that, I have another hot tea take. This is one I'm curious to hear. I'll take Petty over Springsteen any day.
Yeah, I will. And we'll probably end up doing some Springsteen along the way.
It's possible.
Don't get me wrong. The Boss, get down, do your thing. Beautiful, beautiful band. But if I had to, if gun to the head, take one, I'd take Petty over Springsteen.
Oh, I would in a heartbeat. We'll talk more about Springsteen at another day. I have quite a few opinions on the guy, but this isn't the Springsteen episode, but I'm sure he'll come up at some point. Sorry, Aunt Carrie, I know you are probably listening and that's your guy, but I'll take Petty any day. And speaking of story songs, the next one I really want to hear what you think of, because this was kind of the most unique story on the album and the one that confused me a little bit, actually. Petty doesn't usually confuse in his lyrics, but this one actually got me. Something Big.
For me, I'd love to know, because you got the inside track and you know what the songs are, what he said these songs are about. I loved it. It's so laid back. It's the first time we hear just a real acoustic guitar sound on the album, you know, we have acoustic slap drums and really nice drawn out harpsichords, like church organ type feel, almost a gospel type thought in the back of it as far as the keys are going. So what is the real take? What's the real take on the old Something Big meeting?
This is an intense story. It involves drugs and violence. What I was confused about was Speedball's ending, because he does die in the song at the motel.
What confused you?
I thought Speedball OD'd.
But how did he die? Or do you know?
Not officially. I assumed that Speedball, because of his name, had a drug overdose and died. But an online interpretation I read of the song, the only one I could find, said that Speedball was murdered.
Oh, now I got to go back and listen. Do you have the lyrics on the end in front of you?
I can pull them up, certainly.
No worries. I'm curious. I'll go back and listen as well, but that's cool. That's there you go. We see this a lot, and this is what I started to say earlier in the podcast is, you know, I didn't expect something super narrative where we always think we might know what this means, might know what that means, and it wasn't too confusing. But here I've missed the mark on the last three as far as what you've bestowed, the knowledge you've bestowed from the biography. It's cool. That's the beauty of music.
Yeah. But interestingly, when Iovine was asked about this song in the biography, he was asked, what did you think of these story songs? And Iovine said, that's the Dylan thing. He said Petty was inspired by Dylan doing songs like this and Night Watchman and another one later on the album. What do you think of that? I didn't get Dylan vibes from this. I know they worked together later on, but...
You talking about Iovine worked with Dylan later, or
no, Tom Petty did.
Oh yeah, of course. I think that's dependent on when Iovine said this. I think that's a tough thing to say about your artist, because there was always that line drawn between them, whether it just be about their nasal approach to singing or the way it comes across. Everybody was always like, Dylan Petty, you know. I think that's strange for him to say. I don't think, no, I didn't get any Dylan vibes from this, surprisingly. But no, I didn't. I think that's a strange thing to say about one of your artists. He
said that. He said this over 30 years later.
Okay. I don't know, man.
I don't see it. And also, I want to take an opportunity to say, I know Petty's voice has gotten some criticism.
Yeah.
I love Tom Petty's voice. I think it has so much character, and there's a lot of character in it on Something Big you can hear. And I don't think that he should be put vocally wise in the same category as Dylan. I think Dylan has a more obnoxious voice at times, not on all his songs, but I mean, Maggie's Farm.
No, I'm with you. And that's where people always drew that line, you know, in the, they sound the same. That's why I was surprised to hear Iovine say that.
No, they do not sound the same. Dylan's voice turned me off for quite a while. Petty's voice never did. So I think that's a stretch to say, but...
I agree, especially in this song here.
Yes. And the end of side one is up next, which is a more upbeat tune after Something Big. King's Road. This was inspired by Tom Petty visiting King's Road in London. I had to look this up because I felt like this song really evoked the sense of nostalgia. I thought, is this about his childhood? It wasn't at all. It was just about a bohemian style street where people dressed funky, because that's what people did in London.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
I mean, especially there, you know, right, running from Chelsea to Fulham. Do you know, I'm curious, do you know what year he visited? How old he was when he visited?
So he first visited around 76, 77. I know that because the Heartbreakers weren't really gaining traction with the first album in America, but it was more successful in the UK and they were stars there. I believe that is the first time Petty went to London.
It's cool because I wasn't sure if this was an anecdotal song or if it was just a let me think about what a country boy in the middle of King's Road would feel like. For anyone who's listening that is not familiar with the scene of King's Road, in the 60s to the 70s, probably by 81, it was on its decline, or I shouldn't say decline, but moving towards being gentrified a little more than it was. But it was a huge epicenter of the modders in England and the mod scene. And it was also akin to like a Haight-Ashbury kind of place. So you can imagine Tom Petty in the middle of King's Road being like, holy moly, what's going on? An old world boy in the new king, or what's the actual refrain from this? The old world boy?
Old town boy on new town boy on the old King's Road.
Old King's Road, that's what it is. He's almost lost up in everything that's going around him. I enjoyed this. I had to look it up too, just to make sure what the King's Road was, and it was such a neat one. It's a super fun and tight song, especially for the end of side one, and it's a great poppy number 5. It's got a bunch of build up crescendos. It's like a bunch of whole band like drum powered sounds. I put in my notes, it would be like an ultimate either second set ender or just like an insane encore song, the way it's set up.
Yes. And I would have to say, if you like the song, definitely check out the 1982 performance of it from the US Festival. This song is extended to over 6 minutes long.
Oh, I could see it. You can hear it on the album, just the drums, the whole band, but like, it could go for a million years, That's awesome.
Petty was jumping around that stage. It was quite a shock for me to see, because I was fortunate enough to see Tom Petty on what sadly ended up being his final tour. And at that point, he was in terrible pain. He was not jumping up on the stage like he was in 1982. He was not that wild man, but you don't think of Tom Petty being a wild man on stage, but in this performance, he really was.
Not at all. And I'll go one step further and say I didn't think I would hear such a wild song. It's a wild take all the way around for him, in my opinion. Really love this song.
Before we move on from King's Road, once I found out the basis of it all, in a throwback to our previous podcasts, I thought, I'm sure Sonny and Cher went down the old King's Road in 1965.
Oh, they did. I you know what? It's so funny because when I was talking about looking this up, I didn't really look up images. I didn't actually look up images at all. I Wikipedia'd King's Road and then was like, oh, I literally thought it was just a little road in England. I knew where it was, and I had known people talking about it. That's actually where, I can't remember what song it was. I think it was Zeppelin, but the Chelsea drugstore, that's where that was on King's Road. I'm almost positive that's in a Zeppelin song. Now I'm going off on a tangent, but they were. It was that kind of scene. It was that kind of electric mod, bright clothes, bright sounds, bright people scene,
Yes, perfect for Sonny and Cher mid-60s, and they were first popular in England before America, so I'm sure they went down this old road.
Oh shit, they might as well name it King and Queen's Road with them coming down. That's real. That's real. They probably had a blast up on there. That's one to check out. That's one to look up.
Definitely. But sadly, we're leaving the old King's Road and flipping over the side 2, which begins with Letting You Go. This is a much more acoustic, mellow song to open out side 2. I like this one. It's not one of my top favorites on the album, but I think it's a pretty song. And in the Conversations with Tom Petty book, that wasn't the immediate vibe I got. I didn't really get 50s rock and roll from this.
No, and now I'll go back and listen to it again with that thought in mind. But my notes on this is, if I had a gun to my head, this is, I had to pick a least favorite. This is my least favorite of the album. Now, knowing, and I should have looked into this, but knowing that it's the first first song on side B, I can see it a little bit better. But whew, man, coming out of King's Road and then going straight into this, it's not the song I would have picked coming out of there. But on side B, I can understand that. It's nice. It's a good song. This whole album, it was so tough to be critical on this album, or at least, try to pick apart things that you had never thought of before, because most of these songs you've heard a million times. This is one of the ones I hadn't. And it's not the reason why it's my least favorite, but it falls flatter than any other song on the album, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is, if I had to pick, this is my second least favorite. Not quite my least favorite, but we'll get to that.
Heard that.
But yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about this song lyrically. It's kind of a breakup song a bit. It's perfectly nice. It's a perfectly nice tune. I like how it was placed on the album. It's not one of my top Petty favorites, but there's nothing wrong with it. Even a filler Tom Petty song is better than a lot of other songs out there, in my opinion.
Agreed.
But
no, you're good. It's sandwiched into, or in between King's Road and then into our next song, which you were just about to talk about.
Yes, I was. A Thing About You. This is a rocker. This is a fun tune. I think it's a bit redundant lyrically. That's my only criticism of it, but it's really about the sound of it. It's a super upbeat, fun love song. I have a great time hearing it. And it was mentioned in the Conversations book that Mike Campbell especially loved the guitar interplay on it.
Heard.
The writer Paul Zolo even compared it to the Rolling Stones, which I can hear that on this track for sure. I enjoy this one. It's a fun tune.
Yeah, it's fun all the way around. Like, one of the words I wrote in my notes, hoedown. It reminds me of a country dance. And I can feel the love for the guitar pieces because they scream. And another note I had in there is the guitar solos scream like fiddles. So that's why I can see the redundancy of the lyrics, because it was that sort of like grab your partner do-si-do kind of feeling for me. It's definitely a huge crescendo from where we were, at Letting You Go, and a super, super fun part. The only thing is the last 30 seconds of the song is like the weirdest production choice ever. Like, you go and hoe down, and you're thinking you're creeping out the back door, and then it's like 30 seconds of almost silence, and then like little, it just felt like a half thought at the end of the song. It doesn't take away from the song at all, but it definitely doesn't add to the song.
I know what you're saying, and it's nice that you mentioned the hoedown aspect of this song, because you weren't the only one who heard it. This was a country hit in 1985 for the band Southern Pacific, a not very well remembered 80s country band. But this was a duet with Emmylou Harris, who's somebody who's been everywhere. There's no other way to say it. And it's a fun duet. Emmylou Harris has a fantastic voice, and Petty was asked about this version. He said he liked hearing the country spin on it, and that Emmylou Harris was great. It was awesome hearing her sing one of his songs. The one thing I will say about the cover is I do like it, but Southern Pacific is definitely not as strong of a band as the Heartbreakers.
No, of course not.
So in that sense, that song really pales, but this song actually works well as a duet. Hearing that version, it made me want to hear Stevie Nicks hop on the original recording, or have had them do a live version of it. That would have been awesome.
It's definitely another one that I immediately was like, oh, they got to play this live. They have to have rocked it live. But then again, I'm not sure if they ever did.
Yeah, I haven't seen it on any of the live albums that have been released. Even some of the deeper cuts have been. Night Watchman and King's Road have been put on live albums and box sets. And The Woman in Love too, and obviously The Waiting, but not everything here. One of the songs that was done live several times is track number 8, a track we mentioned earlier. The song that gave this album its title, Hard Promises, Insider, the duet with Stevie Nicks. As we said earlier, Stevie Nicks was a Tom Petty groupie and needed a song from him. And he came up with Insider. They recorded it together with him singing the lead. Petty loved the song and said, "I'm sorry, Stevie, I'm keeping it." And of course, he ended up giving her Stop Dragging My Heart Around, which worked pretty well for her, as we all know. So this is the more forgotten Petty-Stevie Nicks collaboration of 1981, but it shouldn't be. I love this song. This is one of the very best Petty songs ever. Just a beautiful heartbreak tune. Their voices just go together so beautifully. Of course, Stevie Nicks is a great harmony singer. She had a lot of practice with that in Fleetwood Mac by this point. And you hear all those skills on it. And first thing I wanted to say was I once requested this song for my friend's radio show when I was in college in 2018, just because it's an awesome song. I had to do it.
It's so great. It's so great. And it led the MTV revolution because it was one of the earlier videos to come through too. And watching the videos or watching that video, you can see the chemistry, but you can also see the reverence or the respect or even the fangirlishness that Stevie has for him. She's hanging on his every note and watching him, literally watching him for vocal cues and whatnot. Not that he's watching her, but she's watching him. If you played this song for me and I didn't know who was doing it, I would say that they were a natural duet, and their band would.
This song also kind of really, I've always loved Stevie Nicks, but this kind of reignited my flame for her a bit, which I appreciated. I've fallen off of her a bit lately for personal reasons, because people sometimes like to taint songs, and I'm not too crazy about that, but we're not going to go into that because that's not what we do here.
That's tea for another time.
It is tea for another time, and I don't know if people are ready for those hot takes. If the wrong person's listening, they will not be ready for it, but we will get there to people who kind of ruined Stevie Nicks for me for a bit. We will get there.
Oh, you know we're going to do some Stevie stuff.
Oh, yes, we will. But this just was a reminder of what a gifted vocalist she is on both duets and as a solo. That voice just cuts through like a knife. This is a perfect song, in my opinion. And Petty said the main reason it wasn't a single was it wasn't even considered because at the time, his record company didn't want him releasing ballads as singles. Petty actually didn't release a ballad as a single until Free Fallin' in 1989, which is crazy to think about because, of course, that was his biggest solo chart hit ever. So, yes, ballads have a point in the Tom Petty catalog, and we could have done something earlier, maybe have put this out so more people know it.
That's surprising. I shouldn't guarantee because I'll have to look back and I don't have it in front of me, but there's got to be ballads all over the 81 Billboard 100. Gotta be.
Oh, there are. This was the year of the corporate rock takeover. The highest selling album of the year was High Infidelity by REO Speedwagon. 2 power ballads are on that album. That has Take It On the Run and Keep On Loving You. Foreigner's Forehead, Waiting for a Girl Like You. Journey had Open Arms. Yes, this is a power ballad year. It was just decided that wasn't right for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And
yeah, I guess I can see that.
In a way, I can see that. But apparently, it was okay for Stevie Nicks because the second single from Belladonna was Leather and Lace.
Yeah, but think about the clout that she has coming off of Fleetwood Mac compared to Heartbreakers. Even though Damn Them Torpedoes was such a hit, they might have thought that she could take on those big boys in that market. I'm just hypothetical where Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers might not have made their way or been muddled immediately in that scene.
Oh, no. Damn the Torpedoes didn't even end up being the biggest Petty album. That came quite a bit later. And they never had anything sell as much as Rumors. Fleetwood Mac were permanent A-listers because of that, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say, of course, I couldn't help but think, of course, Stevie Nicks wanted to work with Tom Petty. Who wants to work with Lindsey Buckingham? Great musician, but I know they dated and there's tension because of that, but he's kind of an asshole big time, actually. Lots of respect for the guy as a musician, but not the nicest guy out there. Very known to be difficult to work with, very single-minded in his vision. And sometimes his vision is brilliant, but not always.
Heard that.
But that's a tangent. Of course, she liked working with Tom Petty more than Lindsey Buckingham. He was much easier to work with by just about every account imaginable.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. He's a proud dude from what I can take from him, Tom Petty. And he knows, actually, I won't say proud, matter of fact. It seems from everything I've read and everything I've listened to interview wise, he's very matter of fact and almost taken aback by people that aren't. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
that's got to be easy to work with because all the cards are on the table.
No, he was definitely a very direct and not a phony, it seemed like, which is definitely appreciated. One of the many reasons we miss Tom Petty.
Exactly.
Of course. And now we're on to the second to last track on the album, The Criminal Kind. This is my least favorite on the album. I just thought this was a filler track, but it does have a great inspiration. Petty, when he was interviewed about the song, he even said, oh, that's a filler.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Paul Zolo mentioned the lyrics, and Petty said it was inspired by the return of Vietnam veterans to the United States and how they were not treated nicely. Veteran hospitals wouldn't care for them. They were treated like the criminal kind, and that's what this song was inspired by. That made me respect the song, even if it's not one I really go out of my way to listen to, because that was a very real issue, probably still going on into 81. I wasn't alive then, but I do know that was a big thing in the 1970s, and it caused a lot of division in the military and the country.
That's a wild mindset to go back and listen to this song, because I had made this song by like the fourth time of listening to it in one day. I had made it this beautiful love story that had, I mean, even Night Watchman, I had interpreted as sort of like this creepy sort of voyeuristic vibe. But when we're down here in Criminal Kind, it was still an angry shout out to an old lover. Again, music, man. You can think whatever you want for it.
I mean, that interpretation does work really well too. Dude. Which is the beauty of music. That is very true. And yes, this was one of the songs that Iovine felt had the Dylan influence. If there's any song here that has it, it is this song, I think.
I'll actually give him on this one. I'll give him that on this one. It definitely did.
On this one, I don't, not so much the other two, but this one definitely, because Dylan did write songs in response to war. That was a topic for him. This was definitely in the Dylan vein more than anything on this album. I'll give Iovine that one. I'm with you.
Yep.
And now we are on to the final track, You Can Still Change Your Mind. Petty said that this was mostly the work of guitarist Mike Campbell, and Tom referred to it as Mike's tribute to Brian Wilson.
No shit. It's my literal notes are a perfect ending for the hashtag. I mean, for the quote unquote story of this album. Felt like a final plea to the girl we've been watching throughout the album. So it's just those wild takes when you're listening through.
Yeah. And Stevie Nicks is once again on backing vocals on this song very prominently. Once again, beautiful. She has quite a few beautiful, distinct backing vocal parts that elevate whole songs. And this is one of them. This one gives me chills. It's just a beautiful, perfect album closer. And with the Beach Boys thing being mentioned, I do kind of hear it. I feel like this was maybe inspired by like God Only Knows sound-wise.
Yeah.
And not many better songs to take a note from than that song. That's one of the best Beach Boys songs. Of course, they have multiple classics.
Agreed.
But as does Tom Petty. And this is definitely a song that was kind of an evolution from Damn the Torpedoes. There was nothing like this on that album at all. This was a bit of an evolution sound-wise from that, which I appreciated. It was Petty doing something new, and it's just a beautiful song.
Yeah, as you found out in our last podcast, sometimes I don't necessarily vibe with the trailing off sad song for a final, for a 10 or for a final period. I think this one worked awesome. Iovine is showing himself here. I think the question I have is for him, unless it was a piece that Tom Petty was like, I can't do without, what is the sound at the start of this song? Like, why do this like for no reason? The song without that could clearly start on a beautiful piece. You didn't need that ear cleansing sound or whatever they want to say it is. It didn't make sense to me. It made no sense.
I agree with that completely. That part threw me off a bit. I hadn't heard this song in a while. I was kind of like, what is this at first?
That sound doesn't relate to anything else. Like, I thought maybe if they brought it back, and I was like, oh yeah, it's got to come back through. No, it's one of them ones that it doesn't add, doesn't take away. It just makes me say, what? Will you listen to that before you put it on wax? And you were like, oh hell yeah, keep in the because that's gonna bring everybody in. Like, I wasn't with that one.
I don't know.
I heard.
And there we have Hard Promises. What grade do you give this album?
I'm bringing it in on an A.
Same here.
That's 2 weeks in a row we matched. It doesn't get an A-, it doesn't get an A+, but gosh darn, if I just start at it musically, like musicianship and the way it was written and produced, right there at A. The way it is put together and stacked on this album, the sequence of it, right there at an A. It's just a solid album. Great listen. If anybody has made it through this far with us this week and has not listened to this album, one, I hope we've piqued your interest, but two, take the time right now to add it to your playlist. It's a good one.
Definitely. And sadly, not one of the Petty albums included on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums list. This one should have been instead of Wildflowers or even Full Moon Fever, like I said earlier. Yeah,
I'm with you on the Wildflowers. We're gonna be canceled for that, but we'll take it to our graves. Wildflowers is overrated. You heard it here. You definitely didn't hear it here first, but you heard it here on Turntables and Tea because we're standing behind it.
Yes, we are. I am not backing down on that one. I will go to my grave saying Wildflowers is overrated.
There you go.
We'll go to my grave saying it. Favorite song on the album?
Whew, you know what? I'm surprised I didn't have it ready. King's Road. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have it ready. King's Road. All the way.
That's perfect. It's for me, Woman in Love. Actually, this was the hot take I forgot to give earlier. I think Woman in Love should have been the first single instead of The Waiting and the album opener. I just love how that song builds. It goes from soft in the verses to that bombastic chorus. It's just perfect. I wish it was the first single.
The bridge in the middle of it too is such an epic, beautiful bridge. I didn't say it earlier, but I've got a note here that I picture a montage of like a happy and sad scenes from a relationship inside of it. Again, maybe I got to take this one to therapy, I guess, because it's like a bad breakup album or a dude in the friend zone album is what it felt like to me. But I agree with you. Great song.
Yeah, but Insider's definitely a close second for me. Can't go wrong with that one either. Oh,
yep.
Hits you.
And they, honorable mentions got to go to Night Watchman for that funkiness. Tom Petty, you got some funk in your trunk on this one, and let it all hang out. I enjoyed that so much.
Yeah, and that's all I think we have to say for Hard Promises. I really love doing this one and going into Heartbreaker land for a couple of weeks. I'm a little sad to be leaving it. I think Petty needs to come back on this podcast, not immediately, but a few months from now. We need to talk about him again because he said so much about all of his songs.
Yeah,
we just have so much to work with because he was so open about all of it, and he was the man. He's going to have to make a comeback here at some point down the road, I'm afraid, because there's just so much to discuss with Petty, I think.
Don't be afraid of that. we got to get him one more positive before we just go into the inevitable episode of Turntables and Tea where we do why Wallflowers is so overrated. That's got to happen at this point now. You know, our opinion will be heard, and that's just how it's going to go from here on out. What do we got next week? We got Moving Pictures, right?
Yes, Moving Pictures. I know the 2 big hits off of the album, but I've never heard the whole thing.
Oh, dig it. All right. Wow. Woof. Ladies and gentlemen, you have no idea what kind of beautiful, oh my gosh, I cannot wait.
I'm excited.
This might be the first time, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here first. This is the first time ever in my whole entire life that I've talked about an album to Charlie, other than Fish, that he hasn't heard from start to finish. So I'm excited. Oh man, now I'm super jammed up for this one. Let's go.
So am I. We will be in Rushland the next few days and recording that. And after that episode, we will be putting up a poll of a few more albums from 1981 so we can finish off this month that you'll all get to vote on.
Yes,
I'm very excited to see the results of that.
There's some super cool ones out there. So get out there, vote it up. Where do we have that? We have that up on Facebook?
Not yet.
Not yet, that's right.
After the Rush episode, we will do that, but
we will
shortly after, or maybe a bit before it's up, so we have some time to not like half-ass the album and give it the same love and care that we've given Hard Promises.
No, most definitely. As we'll give every album. Oh, well, yeah, not that length. Oof. Well,
yeah. So yes, I'm excited to see how that one will turn out. But in the meantime, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it, especially on Spotify. We're hosting it through their platform, and it's pretty cool. So that would be the best place to subscribe, I think, because we can add in some more exclusive features for you if you do that. But we are also available on Amazon Music, Audible, and Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. So be sure to check us out. Thank you all for the support so far. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Turntables and Tea Podcast. Until next time, where you can join us in our moving pictures. We'll see you then.
Peace.